So I think about those of us who work with young people, and a lot of them, they look up to us. They're seeing us. We're modeling to them. Some of the stuff that we're modeling are great things, but a lot of them is questionable, especially when they're just habits, routinely things, right? We're just doing just to do, and going back to this idea of like bringing it back to basics, really understanding where we are, the John 15, passage of, being connected to the vine. How do we get there, as leaders, as pastors, ministers, if we are in autopilot? You talk about this a bit in your talk. Like we could sometimes feel as though we are in autopilot, and we lose the point and the focus of of where we are and where we're going, and not enjoying the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think autopilot can be good or it can be bad. It depends on sort of what's happening. Autopilot just means we're sort of heading in a direction.
Yeah.
If we're heading in a good direction, autopilot can be great, right? And habits, right, can be great. If we have good in certain sense, what's better than a good habit, right? Something where you don't have to expend a whole lot of energy or will to try to make something happen, but you've got a good habit. We have a good bedtime prayer routine for our daughter at home. We begin every night, sort of like right before that prayer, we say, Junia, God loves you and we do too. And I've found myself reflecting, it's just so simple, but I found myself reflecting on this over the last few months in particular, sort of thinking about, I think that's a great habit. I think there's something really profound in that sort of foundation. That's what we all need, a sort of foundation to know that God loves us, and the people around us closest to our most meaningful relationships, they love us too. And I don't have to think every night to tell my daughter that. It's a habit at this point. And that feels like a really good habit, and I'm glad that we have those, and I wish I had more of them. We have a habit to take to observe Sabbath every Saturday as a family.
Nice.
We could go on. Those sorts of habits I love, right? Those sorts of practices that we cultivate, and they become sort of part of who we are. And our daughter, if we try to mess with Saturday Sabbath, she won't stand for it because she's been sort of raised in this context where we don't work on Saturday. And she has our attention, and it's a day for her to celebrate her most meaningful relationships and to rest. All right, so those are good habits, but there is, right, this other side, right, where we have other sorts of habits. We probably have, most of us, pretty bad media habits. We get home and we flip on the TV, or we're browsing the web, or we're scrolling through social media mindlessly, or whatever it is. There are bad habits we have in our lives, and in that sense, that's where I think you're right. Absolutely, this sort of autopilot can become really destructive, and that's where these habits of reflection, to sort of step back from our habits and really ask that sort of first question that I brought up in the lecture, to say, well, hold on, are my habits, are my practices really getting me what I want? Yeah. If I've got a habit to come home and binge on Netflix, is that getting me where I want to go? Maybe I'm encountering sort of profound stories that are sort of deep expressions of our culture, and that's something really, really valuable. Well, it's good to know. Yeah. But we want to be asking those questions of our practices, asking what sorts of people they're forming us to be, ask what sorts of relationships they're helping us develop or detracting from, ultimately asking what sort of life they're helping us build for ourselves, for those we care about, for the world.
Yeah. And I think about, I remember when I was in seminary and I was still serving as our youth leader at my church. And again, the habit of every Thursday was youth night. And it was a good habit, right? Great intentions. But there was a period in the season of my life that I would just arrive, again, autopilot arrive, but I felt like I wasn't present. I was there, prepare myself, the best I could, but I wasn't fully present because I felt like, okay, I knew how to get there. I was there, and I lost a little bit of the intention and the self-reflection of why am I here? What can I bring? How am I able to share who I am? I remember I would even substitute my devotional time to prepare for that night and just focus on them. And again, I was losing myself a bit in the process.
Yeah, and I think, and that's what happens often with practices and habits is even the good ones can sort of atrophy over time because what really grounds a practice is not just the physical things you're doing, but the ideas and the motivations that lie behind them. And when those are present, then the practice really has richness to it. But when this starts to sort of get off its foundation, you can start to drift and actually end up working against the sort of purposes for which we cultivated it in the first place.
Yeah, thank you.